Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 3 hours, I am your host. I am your guide as we cross the time-space continuum together to this place that I call the X Zone. And I've been calling this place the X Zone for the past 25 years. And we come to you Monday through Friday in our new time slot here on the Mutual Broadcast Network from 11 a.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern. The X Zone is a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's also a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And if you'd like to find out more about the X Zone, you can visit our website at xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, we're simply X Zone Radio TV. My first guest tonight is a gentleman I've had the pleasure of knowing for nearly 25 years, and I've had the distinct honor of calling him my friend. Howard Bloom is his name, and Howard is a visiting scholar at New York University. He's the founder of the International Paleo Psychology Project. He's the executive director and editor of the New Paradigm book series, a founding board member of the Epic of Evolution Society, and a member of the New York Academy of Sciences, the National Association for Advancement of Science, the American Psychological Society, the Human Behavior and Evolution Society, and the list goes on and on and on. Here's something that everyone can relate to. Howard Bloom, the gentleman that we're going to be talking to in a very few moments, worked with Michael Jackson, Prince, John Cougar Mellencamp, Kiss, Queen, Bette Midler, Billy Joel, Joan Jett, Diana Ross, Simon and Garfunkel, The Talking Heads, AC/DC, Billy Idol, Grandmaster Flash, and the Furious Five, Run DMC, Simply Reds, as well as the heads of many, many media conglomerate. We're going to be talking about something very serious this first hour here in the X Zone. We're going to be talking about the shootings that have happened over the last week since you and I last talked. A number of police officers lost their lives in Dallas, Texas. Other law enforcement officers lost their lives doing routine stops. Police officers throughout America are being threatened. So I've asked Howard to join me this first hour to try and make sense of what is happening. So joining me now from New York City, the Big Apple, is Howard Bloom. And Howard, welcome back to the X Zone.
Rob, it's good to see you. But what a confusing last 5 days, not to mention what a confusing last 5 weeks. I do some other radio shows. Yeah. I hate to confess that. It makes me sound very unfaithful. But I was on the air. I got a call at 10 o'clock to be on a radio show last Thursday night. And the call was to talk about a naked man in Times Square. So I did an hour and a half of research on the naked man in Times Square, tried to get a unique feed on it. And then 2 minutes before we were supposed to go on the air, my producer said, we cannot talk about the naked man on Times Square. You need to talk about what's happening in Dallas. Well, Rob, I had no idea what was happening in Dallas. But I Googled, and wham, amazing. These shootings were going on at that moment. That is the 5 deaths that took place in Dallas. And nobody knew how many snipers there were. Nobody knew what direction the shots were coming from. It was an incredibly confusing scene. That was Thursday night and Friday morning. By today, I was having drinks with my mentor in neurobiology, the man who brought me into the graduate psychology department at NYU as a visiting scholar, Ted Coons. And I got a call in the middle of getting together with this person I haven't seen in a year, saying, we need you tonight. There have been murders. And I said, what murders? And my producer said, look them up. So here we've got St. Joseph, Michigan. This is just a few days after Dallas. Dallas was just a few days after Orlando. And in between was this massive car bombing in Iraq.
Unreal. Howard, stand by, my good friend. We've got so much to cover this hour. Exo Nation, my guest this hour is Howard Bloom. Visit his website, www.howardbloom.net. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center right here in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Mutual Broadcast Network. Special guest this hour here in the X Zone on the Mutual Broadcast Network. His website is www.howardbloom.com. howardbloom.net. Sorry about that, my friend. Listen, Howard, as an ex-cop myself, my heart goes out to every member of law enforcement, not only in the United States but around the world, because when a cop goes to work, he doesn't put on a uniform, he puts on a target. And well, I just have to say that my heart is with each and every law enforcement officer out there tonight, as it always is. In fact, I was speaking to a good friend of mine who's a deputy sheriff in Florida, and he cannot remember when they have been on such a high alert in the state of Florida when it comes to law enforcement.
It's a tricky situation. On the one hand, a year ago, there were only 16 police deaths at this time of the year. That was way down from the average. The average is 25. This year, at this time, we've only had 27 police deaths. That's a lot, but it's a big country. It's a big North American continent, and that is only two deaths above the average. So we're still running within the range of the average, but none of these things have been very violent, and we have to remember that in addition, there have been some horrifying deaths of people at the hands of police, and that's what's caused a good deal of the problems. We have Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge and Philandro Castile and St. Paul, Minnesota, and something is changing the way we perceive these deaths, and it's called video. It's the ubiquity of video, the fact that there's video everywhere. So we saw the shots of a guy who operates as a cafeteria supervisor and who everybody loved in his cafeteria. And we see him bleeding to death with his girlfriend talking into her iPhone or her Samsung.
But you know what I found very strange about that video? She was very calm.
Yes, she was remarkably calm.
Something was wrong.
Well, I know that when I'm in a crisis, I get astonishingly calm.
Yes, but you are Howard Bloom.
Well, that's not much. Believe me, she, with the help of an audience on her iPhone, she was holding things together, and her daughter was trying her best to comfort her.
I heard that.
So we've seen horrifying things over the last week, and it hasn't always been just the police who are suffering. And, we have this racism in North America, and we have this astonishing thing that has been happening. In the 20th century, there were riots in Cincinnati and riots in Oklahoma City, race riots. Those are early in the century.
Yeah.
And roughly 20 people were killed, an awful lot of people. Today, we have Black Lives Matter. And though you can disagree with the movement, and I certainly disagree with the movement about some things, it is primarily a peaceful movement. And even though there were hundreds of arrests over the weekend in Baton Rouge, hundreds of arrests, there were no deaths, there was no violence. So the black community in general is learning to express its frustrations using the peaceful tools of democracy.
But there are many conspiracy theorists out there who believe that this was a black flag because Hillary Clinton was basically being put to fry in Congress thanks to the director of the FBI.
Right. So she had her FBI meeting early in the morning on a week ago Saturday. And it's true, these things have grabbed the headlines, but they haven't just grabbed the headlines away from Hillary Clinton. they've grabbed the headlines away from Donald Trump.
Exactly.
He's been edged out of the headlines. So it's a peculiar media environment, and it's a media environment where soft stories like Donald Trump, which is becoming rapidly a hard story because he is the presidential nominee of the Republican Party.
Right.
His statements are only able to dominate the press when there is no real heavy-duty, serious news around. And he's benefited from the fact that the world is, frankly, getting more peaceful every year. I mean, if you go back to 1650, 350 years ago, your odds of dying a violent death at the hands of a fellow human being were 10 times what they are today. In other words, the peace has gone up by a factor of 10. And we're benefiting from that. The rate of violence in North America has been going down steadily since 1992. And if you look at it on the long scale, it's just been going down steadily over the course of 2 centuries. So because there are these gullies where there is no serious news, no news of mass murder, Donald Trump has been able to dominate the headlines. And I don't know about you, but even though I loathe Donald Trump, I wake up every day looking forward to the next Donald Trump headline because it's entertainment, if nothing else.
It is, but I find it very refreshing that here you've got someone, and I think you and I have discussed this before, but for our new audience in this new time slot, where you have someone who's shown the American people that you don't have to be a political insider to get to where he is.
Of course, you have to have a lot of money.
Well, of course.
And you have to have 35 years of press momentum.
And you have to have 2 big cojones.
Yes, well, 2 of my books that have never been published by a major publisher. I've got 6 books. 4 of them are published by major publishers. But 2 of them were orphans. And I've rewritten them heavily, and both are coming out through publishers. One is coming out in December. That's the Muhammad Code, How a Desert Prophet Brought You ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Boko Haram, or How Muhammad Invented Jihad. And the other one is called How I Accidentally Started the 60s. And in the original version, Timothy Leary said it was a monumental masterpiece of American literature and filled with nonstop waves of scientific comedy routines and hilarity, and it was a wow, woo, aha experience. And he compared it to James Joyce, which is pretty heavy-duty praise. That one's coming out in the spring. And it's just been named the official book of the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love. There's going to be a Summer of Love 50th anniversary concert in San Francisco, which is where the Summer of Love was headquartered.
I understand that you're going to be the new guru of the new hippie movement.
Wouldn't that be nice?
I think so. I still say you should run for president. So.
Well, who knows if I'd ever have time to run for president or to be the guru of the new hippie movement. But one way or the other, when I was going through How I Accidentally Started the 60s, which was originally finished in 1995. Guess what I found? A comedy routine based on Donald Trump.
No.
Guess who had written it? Me. Because early in the 1990s, Donald Trump was making huge headlines.
Right.
Constantly. And the big headline of the time was Donald Trump had this immense yacht, and he'd come upon economic hard times, and he was trying to get rid of it. But it was a yacht so big that only governments could afford to buy it. And the speculation was that the Japanese were about to buy Donald Trump's yacht. Now, and the Japanese were doing very well at the time.
Yes.
They were leading the world in economic growth. The point is, Donald Trump has been making headlines since the 1980s. He has built up a social momentum. He has built up a social magnetism, a social gravity. And he's able to surf that now. Hillary Clinton, poor baby, has only been making the headlines for 30 years or 25 years, a shorter amount of time, though she has definitely made headlines too. They're both headline grabbers. But meantime, we have all of this violence going on in the middle of almost entirely peaceful protests on Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter, again, I disagree with them about certain things, but I have black friends, and I'm afraid that when they're driving around in a car, they're going to be shot. Or when they're walking around on the street, they're going to be shot. Because they look suspicious. Why?
Man, I've got to tell you, I don't understand the difference. You know, up here, way up north.
Yeah.
You know, I was on the force for a number of years, and, you know, whether you were black, white, yellow, gray, and I'm sure if we came across some extraterrestrials from Alpha Centauri, they were all treated with respect.
Right.
Because we were taught to always treat the person on the other side of the badge as we would want to be treated.
Well, remember, you are in Canada, which is a civilized country.
Okay.
Compared to Canada, the United States is not a civilized country. One of the problems that the officers in Dallas who were trying to figure out how many snipers there were, where the sniper was, and to isolate him, one of the problems they had was that in these peaceful marches, there were a dozen guys wearing camouflage, walking around with assault weapons, with automatic guns, the same kinds of guns that are used in these mass shootings. It becomes very hard, for one thing, for me, it is very hard to imagine a march in which you got people wandering around with assault rifles.
Exactly.
That would scare the pants off of me. And in Canada, you don't have such things.
No.
In Canada, we have a gun mania in the United States. We are addicted to guns. Once upon a time, George Bush Jr., who said very few wise things, said we had an addiction to oil. And that was a very good statement. But we have a growing addiction to guns. And one of the reasons that in Dallas there were a dozen guys carrying these RP-47s, or whatever they're called, RK-47s, is because they've made a religion in the Southwest out of open carry, out of the right to call guns. That religion is so powerful in America today that, what is her name? Sarah Palin.
Yes.
That Sarah Palin went online and said, I believe Christ would have been open carry. What? Jesus? The guy who gave the Sermon on the Mount? The guy who said that the meek shall inherit the earth? What kind of crazy interpretation?
But you have to remember that Sarah Palin comes from Alaska.
Yes, that's quite true. Yeah. And she's proud of shooting animals that are bigger than she is.
Yeah,
poor animals.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, America is in the middle of a gun craze. America is in the middle of a gun addiction. The NRA has really gone over the top with this open carry thing. I do interviews periodically with Dr. Sky, Steve Cates.
Yeah, super guy.
And I love him. He's terrific.
He is. He really is.
But he does two shows. One is his Dr. Sky show, and the other is his Liberty show, his right-wing conservative show. And if you are lucky enough or unlucky enough to, well, it's lucky, to be his guest on that Liberty show, you will sit through commercial after commercial after commercial for gun stores. And they are promoting open carry like crazy. And crazy is the word. These things should not be out in public. There's no way that civilians should be allowed to carry these things. In fact, I can't see any decent reason that civilians should be allowed to own these things.
All right, Howard, you and I have to do something that all radio stations must do, and that's called take a commercial break with our news at the bottom of the hour from the Mutual Broadcast Radio News Center. Howard Bloom is our special guest, www.howardbloom.net, and we'll both be back on the other side of the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and you're listening to us on the Mutual Broadcast Network. Whatever you do, do not go away. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Mutual Broadcast Network. My guest this hour is the only person that I know who can do as many push-ups as my buddy, Howard Bloom. How many push-ups did you do today, Howard?
1,090. I was humiliated. I fell 10 short of 1,100.
Oh, and my heart bleeds for you, my friend.
Right. I had my 73rd birthday on June 25th, so that's not half bad. But I'm still pondering this business of these mass murders. There are actually several philosophical systems around today that are calling for a race war and that believe that the race war will be the end of time, and after the race war, all the people who've been faithful, loyal, and true to whatever worldview we're talking about will all be snatched up to heaven. And one of those points of view comes from the black Muslims in the United States, the Nation of Islam, which preaches that a race war will end all time. Now, when Micah Johnson, the killer in Dallas, Micah Johnson didn't call himself merely Micah Johnson. He called himself Micah X Johnson, which indicates an allegiance to the black Muslims. In addition, he was allegedly a member for 6 months of the new Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. He was a person who liked the Facebook page of the African American Defense League. And the African American Defense League had just, before he did his shooting, had just put out a message saying the pig has shot and killed Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. You and I know what we must do, and I don't mean marching, making a lot of noise, or attending conventions. We must rally the troops. It is time to visit Louisiana and hold a barbecue. The highlight of our occasion will be to sprinkle pig's blood. So this is the kind of belief system in which this guy was steeped. Now, he's not alone. White supremacists in America are eagerly looking forward to a race war. Jihadists are eagerly looking forward to a war that will bring the end of time, the day of judgment, and all of the faithful will be snapped up to the bosom of the Lord and live in paradise with Muhammad. So these views are toxic, and they remain in abeyance in society, sleeping, dormant, a good part of the time. But periodically they arise and they create enormous problems. Thank God the people who are marching in the streets are marching with Black Lives Matter, which is a secular movement that does not believe in violence. It just does not believe in violence. But then there are these fringe belief systems, and one of them is not a fringe belief system. It's called militant Islam, and it is jihadist, and it's out for jihad big time because it's following the demands laid down by Muhammad in 629 AD, that Islam take over the entire globe and do it through violence and do it through jihad. So we're in a crazy world, and the question is whether Larry Darnell Gordon, the 45-year-old who killed 2 bailiffs today and wounded a deputy who was in intensive care when we started this program, what this guy was motivated by. His wife says he was a good guy. She never expected any of this thing of this kind out of him, and that he was just dying to get back to his family. There was some sort of an altercation on the 3rd floor of the Berrien County Courthouse. It was 2:25 p.m. today. It was a fight between Larry Darnell Gordon, who, by the way, from his mugshot, is not identifiably black or white. If he is partly black, it's only 1/8 black. It looks like he has blue eyes. He got into a fight with the 2 bailiffs. They did not think he was dangerous. He was not in handcuffs. And he took the gun of one of the bailiffs and killed 2 bailiffs. And then he was killed before he could kill anybody else. The question is, was there a racist ideology behind this? Was there an ideology behind this at all? Or was this somebody being abused by the police? Or was this somebody who was abusing the police?
Or was it somebody who was being programmed through the social media, subliminally?
Well, but we've all been programmed for as long as there have been human beings with consciousness. You know, we've been promoting worldviews to each other for at least 100,000 years on the face of this planet. We've been doing it in big cities where a lot of different views could contend with each other since the city of Jericho was built 10,000 years ago, and then the city of Katal Hayok in what is today Turkey was built. So this kind of thing's going on with or without the internet for a very long time. You know, Christians were up against the pagans of Rome, and that was a major ideological struggle, and it took place without any cell phones, without any text messages, without any internet.
Yeah, but that brings up an excellent point, Howard. How much of this violence is being spurred by the media who put everything on air?
Well, the media includes you and me. Look at the points of view that you and I discuss. We have, as it says at the beginning of every episode, the X Zone is an opinion show.
That's right.
And we get into some very harsh and judgmental opinions. there is always the possibility that somebody could misconstrue what we're saying and take it to an extreme with a gun in his hand. Now, fortunately, that's never happened.
Yeah.
But you know, the marketplace of ideas is what we have. Something in Western civilization no other civilization in the history of humanity has been able to achieve. We have 10 times the amount of peace that we had in 1650. We have a lifetime that's twice the lifetime of the average person in 1850. We have the lowest paid worker makes what an entire tenement full of the lowest paid workers in 1850 made in London. If you measure the IQ using the Stanford Binet IQ test of just an average group of kids in the street, average high schoolers, they will come out with an average IQ close to genius level, 135. 35 IQ points above what it was 100 years ago. So we've raised the average IQ 35 points. And the average height is 4 inches taller than it used to be. And this has been achieved by Western civilization and by no other civilization on the face of the planet. China is working to catch up, but what's it doing it with? With the Western system. It's adopted a big part of the Western system. And what makes the Western system what it is? Freedom of speech is a big part of it.
Yes.
Freedom to have different opinions is a big part of it. My girlfriend reads the New York Post. The New York Post is controlled by an Australian named Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch has extreme right-wing points of view and hates Hillary Clinton. So she comes to me with all kinds of stuff that she deeply believes, because she's gotten it from Rupert Murdoch, about Hillary Clinton. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm pro-Hillary Clinton. I think the madman on the scene is Donald Trump. And yet, we're able to have these different points of view, and we have a system of toleration that encourages us to have these different points of view and to discuss them rather than shooting each other over them. And that's part of the genius of the Western system. It's part of what's added 40 years to the average human life.
So how come other systems and other societies have not been able to adapt our system, which has a proven track record?
Well, the Chinese are doing their best, but they're doing it without freedom of speech. They're doing it while restricting political speech. We will see if it works. So far, it's working brilliantly. They've been growing at the rate of anywhere from 7% to 11% a year, depending on the year. They've more than doubled the economy they had when Deng Xiaoping decided to take in capitalist competition in the 1980s. We'll see how far they can get without political freedom of speech. But they're certainly creative at what they're doing. They've got an app on your phone that if you've got a health complaint, you type in your symptoms, and it takes you to the appropriate doctor, it takes you to the appropriate hospital, it directs you to the appropriate drugs. We have nothing like that.
Well, you've got Obamacare.
Yes, we have Obamacare, and it seems to be a big lumbering elephant. It's an improvement over the old system went like this. Back in 1960, America spent 4.5% of its gross domestic product on medical care. By the time George Bush Jr. finished his administration, America was spending 17.5% of its gross domestic product on medical care, and that was damaging our ability to compete in world trade. For example, back in the 1970s and 80s, when the American auto industry was under assault from the Japanese auto industry, for every American car produced, $2,400 went into medical care for the workers who'd worked on that car. For every Japanese car produced, only $800 had gone into medical care.
Well, that's because they're smaller than we are.
But which country, yes, they're tinier, but which they were, now they're huge. But which country do you think had the better medical care?
Japan.
Remember, the Japanese medical care was 1/3 the cost of American medical care.
And they still had the better care.
And they still had the better outcomes. They now live longer than you and I can expect to live growing up in North America. So something had to be done to contain the costs of medical care and improve the quality of medical care. Obamacare, which was really Romney Care, it was a Republican system that had been generated by the Heritage Foundation, which is a right-wing Republican think tank, is elephantine. It's Byzantine. It's so complex we don't know what's going to happen with it. So does it need improvement? You bet. Do we need to increase the quality of care in our system and decrease the cost of that care? You bet. So something desperate is needed, and we'll see. But the fact is that you know that Americans right now are at each other's throats. The people who believe in Hillary Clinton can barely talk to people. In fact, sometimes do not talk to people who believe in Donald Trump. Donald Trump people do not want to talk to people who believe in Hillary Clinton. The Bernie Sanders people are having a hard time getting the gumption to even talk to the Hillary Clinton people. And because we've been so fragmented for so long, and because part of the Republican approach for the last 12 years or so has been make no compromises, show how ideological you can be, do not do politics. Stop government from working. Well, our government has stopped working, and we are apparently not admired in the world to the same extent that we were when we had a functioning bureaucracy, or functioning, I said the wrong word, when we had a functioning democracy roughly 12 years ago. So it's a tricky situation.
And then you've got what's happening now in North Korea, with North Korea flexing once again its mighty lack of muscles because the United States wants to put a missile system in to protect South Korea.
Well, actually, the North Koreans have given us good reason to want to put a missile system in.
Sure they have.
Over the weekend, well, first of all, you know that they've tested 4 atomic bombs so far. Some of those tests have apparently not been successful, but they've been testing them. Over the weekend, they tested a ballistic missile launched from a submarine. Now, why is that dangerous? Because right now it's not perfected, and it only traveled 248 miles. But once they perfect it, their primary targets are 2: South Korea and the United States.
And even at a missile range of 250 miles, the international water is only 12 miles offshore. So they can still get very close.
Now, their submarine fleet consists of 70 submarines.
Right.
That's a lot of submarines for a little tiny country. But it's decrepit. It's old. It's rusted. It doesn't have tremendous capabilities. It has tremendous capabilities when it comes to hiding offshore on the Korean Peninsula. But it doesn't have ocean-going capabilities. However, the French have been selling to the Pakistanis for the last 12 years or so the technology for a super stealth sub. And several of these subs have been built in Pakistan and Karachi, the harbor city of Pakistan. These subs have a range of 11,000 miles. It is only 6,000 miles from North Korea to the offshore areas of the United States. And with a missile launching capability, that puts an awful lot of American cities at risk. And these will be mid-range ballistic missiles. And remember, it was the North Koreans who sold ballistic missile technology, or missile technology in general, to the Iranians. And the Iranians now have a ballistic missile that will travel 2,200 miles. So the Koreans do not represent a serious threat now. But in order to assess threats, you have to look into the future. And missile-launched ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads will be a serious threat to the United States if Kim Jong-un gets them off the ground. And he's persistent, and he's diligent, and there's no question he will eventually get them off the ground.
All right, so let me play the devil's advocate here, like I love doing with you, Howard. Why don't they just annihilate North Korea? Bang, goodbye.
Because North Korea is a protectorate. It's an ally of China. However, North Korea over the last 2 weeks declared China its enemy.
That wasn't very smart.
No, that's not very smart at all. And the protective umbrella that shields it is China. Because China will take an attack on North Korea as an attack on China. And China has been a nuclear nation since the 1960s. And China has been putting satellites into space for a long time now, and they're building their own space station. What does that mean? Those rockets are ballistic missiles. Those rockets are thoroughly capable of hitting anywhere they want in the United States. And there's an old rule in military affairs that offense outflanks defense. That is, even if you can put up a ring of defensive missiles, some of those offensive missiles aimed at St. Louis, aimed at L.A., aimed at New York City, aimed at Toronto, are going to get through, no matter how good our defense is. And a nuclear weapon is enough to annihilate a city. So we have a world that's going to get very tricky. There was a resolution that was forwarded this morning on the floor of the Democratic Platform Committee. And it was a resolution that said, if Iran ever dares try to break the chains that we think we put on it, on its nuclear program, with the nuclear deal that we made, that we will attack militarily to wipe out their nuclear capabilities. Well, guess what happens to that in a Democratic convention, which is has a heavy number of delegates who come from the Bernie Sanders wing? It was defeated overwhelmingly.
Howard, stand by, my good friend. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour is the one and only Howard Bloom. His website is www.howardbloom.net. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and you're listening to us around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, right here on the Mutual Broadcast Network. Don't go away. That is the website for our guest this hour, the one and only Howard Bloom. Howard, I've said this a million times. Thank you so much for doing the great work you do and for bringing the rationality back to radio when it comes to trying to understand what this crazy world is all about, my friend.
Been on with you for roughly 15 years at this point. I've enjoyed every year of it.
Well, I thank you for that, my friend. Listen, we've got about 4 minutes left, Howard.
Well, here's the big wrap-up.
All right.
We humans are fascinated by violence, and we're fascinated by death. Mm-hmm. And the result is that when deaths occur the way that they did today in St. Joseph, Michigan, the way that they did over at the end of last week in Dallas, Texas, mm-hmm. we glue our attention to it.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, and we've already said it twice during this show, is that the rate of violent murder in this world has gone down by a factor of 10. The world is 10 times as peaceful as it was in 1650. That's an astonishing accomplishment.
So we're doing things right.
But here's the trick.
Okay.
We don't realize that we're doing it. How often have you heard this figure cited by other people? None.
No.
Never. So we don't know that we're doing it. And because we don't know that we're doing it, we don't have a clue as to how we're doing it. Now, if our great-grandparents could increase the peace in our life by a factor of 10, mm-hmm. what do you think we owe our great-grandkids? Increasing peace by another factor of 10 or more.
Exactly.
Because we have a higher platform to work from than our great-great-grandparents did. Understanding, now presumably, maybe we will continue this magic of being able to increase the rate of peace without having a clue as to what we are doing. But if we understand what we are doing, the odds of being able to increase the rate at which we grow peace.
Let me ask you a hypothetical question at this point, my friend. We've got about 2 minutes left. If you were president of the United States this very minute, how would you handle the offense in Dallas, Texas?
I would try with all my might to do what the president has been doing and try to outlaw assault weapons. Mm-hmm. I would try to roll back carry laws, but the president doesn't have power over these things.
Right.
But I would do my best to decrease the amount of guns carried in the United States. Look, in Australia, they had a mass killing 20 years ago. They outlawed guns in public, and the result has been they've had a remarkably low murder rate ever since, and no more mass killings. We need to do that in the United States.
Another quick question. Do you think there's any problems with President Obama and Vice President Biden both being in Dallas tomorrow?
Well, Dallas has proven a remarkably difficult city for presidents.
Exactly.
And so, yes, but there's always a risk. And the first law of science, as I know it, is the truth at any price, including the price of your life. That law is the law of courage. And sometimes you have to step into dangerous situations and do your best.
And that is something you do, my friend, and I want to thank you again. Let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and where they can get your books.
It's howardbloom.net. Right now, copies of the Muhammad Code are selling for $925 used, and copies of How I Accidentally Started the 60s are going for $225 used. But those books will be out soon. In December, look for the Muhammad Code. In the spring, look for How I Accidentally Started the 60s.
At a better price, I hope.
Yes.
Howard, take care of yourself. My very best to you, my friend, and to your better half. And also thank Lachette for her hard work.
Okay. Have a wonderful night, Rob.
You too, my good friend.
Congratulations on the Mutual Network.
Thank you very much, and blessings to you, and be safe in New York. Bye-bye, Howard.
Bye.
All right, Exonation. Howard Bloom has been my guest this hour. www.howardbloom.net. Now, I'll be back on the other side of the Mutual Broadcast News as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. You can always send me an email, studio@xzoneradiotv.com. And coming up next, Wilda Wiaka, the host of The Science of Magic. Let's get a shamanic aspect on what's going on in the world today. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away.